He went undercover to see how his employees really treated customers. But when he saw a homeless man being thrown out, he knew he had to step in. What happened next shocked everyone. The smell of fresh bread and sizzling food filled the air as James Carter, the billionaire owner of Carter's Bistro, walked into one of his own restaurants, disguised as a regular customer. Wearing a worn-out jacket and jeans, with a fake scruffy beard, no one recognized him. And that was exactly what he wanted. For weeks, James had heard rumors, complaints from customers, whispers about mistreatment. He needed to see the truth for himself. But he never expected to witness what happened next. As he waited in line to order, he saw a homeless man walk in, his clothes tattered, his face tired but hopeful. "Excuse me," the man said softly to the cashier. "Do you have any leftovers? Anything you're throwing away?" Before the cashier could answer, a shift manager stormed over. "Get out! We don't serve people like you." James's stomach twisted. The homeless man shrank back, his face filled with humiliation. "I wasn't asking for a free meal. Just scraps." The manager scoffed. "I said leave, now." The homeless man sighed, turning toward the door, defeated. James clenched his fists. This was his restaurant, his employees. And this was unacceptable. Before the man could step outside, James called out, his voice steady, commanding, "Wait!" The room fell silent. The shift manager frowned, glaring at James. "Mind your business." James took a step forward, his disguise still intact. "He just wanted food. You didn't have to treat him like that." The manager scoffed. "We don't need people like him ruining the place. Paying customers come first." James's blood boiled. He exhaled slowly. Then, right in front of everyone, he pulled off his fake beard and removed his jacket. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered in shock. "Wait, that's James Carter." The shift manager's face drained of color. James locked eyes with him, his voice dangerously calm. "You're fired." The entire restaurant froze. The manager stammered. "Sir, I didn't know." James didn't let him finish. "That shouldn't matter. No one should ever be treated like that in my restaurant." He turned to the homeless man, his expression softening. "Sir, please, sit anywhere you like. Tonight, your meal is on me." Tears filled the man's eyes as the other employees and customers watched in stunned silence. James glanced around the room, his voice loud and clear. "Let this be a lesson. We don't just serve food here. We serve people with dignity and respect. And if anyone can't understand that, they don't belong here." The manager stormed out. And James? He sat with the homeless man, making sure he had the best meal of his life. Because sometimes, being a boss isn't about running a business. It's about leading with humanity. 1 week later, news of what happened at Carter's Bistro spread like wildfire. Social media blew up with customers praising James Carter's actions. The video of him firing the manager on the spot had gone viral, with millions watching the billionaire stand up for a man in need. But for James, this wasn't just about going viral. It was about fixing a deeper problem. So he made a decision, one that would shock his entire company. A company-wide meeting. A week later, James stood at the front of a massive conference room, his entire management team seated before him. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone had heard what happened at the restaurant. James looked around the room, his voice firm. "What happened that night was unacceptable, and if it happened once, I have to assume it's happened before." Some managers shifted uncomfortably. James continued. "So, moving forward, things will change. Effective immediately, every Carter's Bistro location will implement a dignity-first policy." Murmurs spread across the room. One executive hesitantly raised a hand. "Sir, what does that mean?" James exhaled, leaning forward. "It means that no one, no matter their financial situation, will be treated like trash in my restaurants." He pulled out a document and placed it on the table. "We're launching a company-wide program. Any restaurant waste that would have been thrown out will now go to shelters and food banks, and any person who walks into our restaurants hungry, especially those in need, will be treated with kindness, not judgment." Silence. Then a senior executive muttered, "But won't this hurt our brand?" James's gaze hardened. What hurts our brand is treating human beings like they don't matter." The room went dead silent. Then, a younger manager hesitantly spoke up. "Sir, I think this is incredible." Another nodded. "Honestly, it's about time. Restaurants waste so much food. Why not put it to good use?" Slowly, the tension shifted. James smiled. "Exactly. And if any of you disagree, you're free to leave. But this is my company now." No one moved, because deep down, they knew he was right. The impact. Within a month, Carter's Bistro became one of the first restaurant chains to openly support food programs for the homeless. Within 6 months, other businesses followed. And within a year, James Carter wasn't just known as a billionaire. He was known as the man who changed an industry. And to him, it all started with one simple moment: stopping a man from being thrown away like garbage. Because in the end, humanity is the greatest investment of all. 1 year later, James Carter stood outside a brand new building, the sign above the entrance gleaming in the morning sun. Carter Community Kitchen and Resource Center. A place where anyone in need could walk in, get a hot meal, and find resources to rebuild their lives. This wasn't just an expansion of his restaurant chain. It was a mission. Reporters and community leaders gathered as James stepped up to the podium. The world had watched what he did that night in his restaurant, and now, he was taking it even further. He took a deep breath and smiled. "1 year ago, I saw something that changed me." The audience listened in silence. "I watched as a man was humiliated for asking for food, and I realized then we had failed, not just as a business, but as a society." He glanced at the homeless man from that night, Michael, now standing in the front row, no longer on the streets but employed, healthy, and full of hope. James continued, "I knew then that I had to do more, and today I'm proud to open the Carter Community Kitchen, a place where no one will be turned away, where food is never wasted, and where dignity is always served." The audience erupted into applause. Michael wiped a tear from his eye as he stepped onto the stage. "Mr. Carter, you didn't just give me food that night, you gave me my life back." James smiled, shaking his hand. "And now, we're going to do the same for thousands more." As the doors to the community kitchen opened, people flooded inside, families in need, struggling workers, the forgotten members of society. James watched, knowing one thing for certain. This wasn't about charity. This was about changing the world, one meal at a time. And it had all started with one act of kindness. 5 years later, the impact of Carter Community Kitchens had spread far beyond what James Carter ever imagined. What started as one small initiative had now expanded into hundreds of locations across the country, each one offering hot meals, job training, and support programs for those in need. But today was something even bigger. James stood at the grand opening of the Carter Foundation for Social Change, an organization dedicated to tackling homelessness, food insecurity, and fair employment practices. The world was watching. Reporters, business leaders, and government officials filled the hall as James stepped onto the stage. He took a deep breath, looking at the massive banner behind him. "No one gets left behind." 5 years ago, I walked into my own restaurant undercover. I thought I was there to inspect the business. Instead, I found a broken system. I saw people being discarded, people who just needed a chance. He looked out at the crowd, making sure they felt the weight of his words. Today, we're not just feeding the hungry. We're changing lives. We're giving people opportunities, dignity, and hope. The audience rose to their feet in applause. Then James turned to Michael, the man who had once been thrown out of his restaurant. Now, Michael was the director of operations for the Carter Community Initiative. Michael stepped forward, taking the microphone. 5 years ago, I was just another homeless man being ignored. But one person saw me. He didn't just give me food, he gave me a second chance. And today, I get to do the same for thousands of others." The crowd cheered. Some wiped away tears. James smiled proudly. This wasn't just a company anymore. This was a movement. And as he looked out at the people whose lives had been changed, he realized it had all started with one moment, one decision, one act of kindness. And now, the world would never be the same. 10 years later, the sun shone brightly over Washington, D.C., where a massive crowd gathered in front of the United States Capitol. Today wasn't just another milestone for Carter Community Kitchens. Today was history in the making. James Carter stood at the podium, looking out at the thousands of people who had come to witness something that had never been done before. Behind him, banners stretched across the Capitol steps, displaying bold words: "The Carter Bill, ending hunger and homelessness for good." This wasn't just a corporate initiative anymore. This was a national movement. James took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. 10 years ago, I walked into one of my own restaurants undercover. I saw the truth. A truth that changed me forever. That day, I made a promise to never let another person be turned away, humiliated, or ignored, simply because they had fallen on hard times. The crowd listened in complete silence. And today, I'm proud to stand before you as we take the next step. Not just as a company, but as a nation. Applause erupted. James turned to Michael, now standing beside him. Not as someone in need, but as a national leader in homelessness advocacy. Michael stepped forward, his voice filled with emotion. "This bill will change everything. No more families sleeping on the streets, no more wasted food while people go hungry, no more treating poverty like a crime." Tears filled the eyes of many in the crowd, because this wasn't just another billionaire making a donation. This was a man who had dedicated his life to real change, and as the President of the United States stepped onto the stage to officially sign the Carter Bill into law, James Carter realized. This all started with one meal, one act of kindness, one moment of standing up for what was right. And now, it had led to something far greater, a future where no one was left behind. And that would be his greatest legacy.